Okay, welcome to this second GCSE RS revision video on the topic of good and evil, and this is video 2 of 5, and we're looking in this video at crime and its causes, theories of punishment, the idea of people who work with prisoners, reformers and chaplains, and the death penalty. Let's get started. So, what is crime and what is sin? Well, let's start with the word sin. Deliberate immoral actions breaking a religious or a moral law. The context is in the Bible and the idea of the Olympic Games where you miss perfect bullseye. You do something just less than it needs to be. And so that's what a sin is. A crime is any offence punishable by law. Many things are sins, as it were, that might offend God or our God. But they're not crimes, they don't offend the Queen, as it were. And so it might be wrong to cheat on your husband or wife, but it's not a crime. Some things are both a sin and a crime, stealing and killing. And a crime is anything punishable by law. Who can punish? Well, someone who's a lawful authority, or the government. The government makes laws which govern our behaviour. How do we make sure they do that? Well, we use police to enforce. The police prevent, detect crime, and enforce the law. What does the criminal justice system do? Well, it helps policemen, once they've caught criminals, to enforce these laws with punishments for crime. So some sins are not considered crimes in our society. Adultery, working on Sunday, these are both against the Ten Commandments. But unlike crime, which can lead to punishment, sin can lead to personal suffering. If you work a 90-hour week, including a Sunday, that could cause suffering. You get blood pressure or whatever. But more significantly, apart from harming ourselves and harming others, sin for Christians offends God, and perhaps offends the church as well. And certain sins can lead to excommunication, being cut off from the church. Now, in different churches, there's different attitudes to excommunication, but in most churches, there's something like this. Even the Quaker Church, if you were a war criminal or something like that, then you'd be not welcome in a Quaker meeting. And in the Catholic Church, there are certain things, trying to get remarried and other things like that would cause excommunication because it goes against the natural moral law. Whether it excludes you from heaven, that's an interesting question. And some Protestants would say God's grace is enough to forgive people who seek forgiveness. But if you don't seek forgiveness, does it cut us off from heaven? In Britain in the 21st century, there are a lot of crimes reported. 30,000 crimes are committed, it's thought, each day, ranging from crimes against poverty, crimes against people through, for example, internet crime and fraud. Statistically, the most danger is by antisocial behaviour. Society is concerned with extremism and sexual offences in particular. So, fraud, you can see in the pie chart, drug offences, homicide, assault, sexual assault, burglary, criminal damage, arson. These are some of the main ones, with theft of vehicles and others. In contrast, Christians are concerned with sins. Famously, the 7 deadly sins, which are related to the idea of virtues and vices: pride, lust, gluttony, sloth, envy, greed, wrath. All of these are things you can't be arrested for, but they are attitudes of the heart, attitudes of the mind that Christians would consider deadly, in that they prevent you from developing the opposite of pride, which is humility, the opposite of greed, which is generosity, and so on. And Christians want to become these kind of virtuous people. So what is the cause of a crime? Poverty may be the mother of a crime, but a lack of good sense is the father. And you can say there's a difference between reasons and excuses. Reasons and excuses. Many things can be the cause of crime: peer pressure, poor mental health, drug and alcohol addiction, unemployment, the media because of violent television, poor education, meaning exclusion from school, poor parenting, that is abusive, violent, or you're from a broken home, poverty because you're living in an area of poverty. So it's important that people are brought up with good understanding of the concepts of good and bad and the difference between the two. Members of society have a duty to follow laws. Parents and schools have a moral responsibility to teach the difference between right and wrong. So young people will be respectful of others and, most importantly, not commit crime. It's a very religious idea, and not clear that all schools do it. All religions agree on the importance of law, and St. Paul, for example, for Christians, argues that you should recognize the authority of the ruler. Does he not carry the sword in vain? Meaning it's right for rulers to enforce law. So Christianity believes the role that law plays in maintaining order and protecting citizens is very, very important. So what then are the aims of punishment? If that's the cause of crime, what are the aims of punishment? What is punishment? Well, in general, the word means a penalty given to someone for a crime or a wrong they have done. But why we punish people differs. Some theories are what we would call instrumental theories, and some are more objective theories of punishment. Retribution is a retributive theory of punishment, an objective theory of punishment. That punishment is when the state or some official authority in a way gets official revenge or gets even with a person for committing the crime. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. For some crime or victims of crime, this is the only way they can feel that justice is done. I want equal done to that person that's done to me. But most theories of punishment are not retributive or objective. They are kind of subjective or instrumental theories of punishment. So we do something for some end. We protect society from criminals causing further victims of crime. So a prison sentence removes a person from society, like terrorists and murderers, rapists and drug dealers, so they will not be a threat to society. Reparation, we might force someone who's done, criminal damage to pay stuff back. And there are programs where restorative justice happens, community service, cleanup for vandals, scrubbing off graffiti, allowing offenders to attempt to make up for the crime they've committed. Again, it's a sort of instrumental theory. Yes? Okay, that's fine. Vindication, the effective punishment that shows that law and government deserve respect and should be followed. This allows people to have confidence in the law and respect in it, the role it plays in creating order. Deterrence, we might do something to deter criminals, to put them off doing a crime. Historically, the main purpose of the death penalty for a deterrent to where criminals who are caught need to be made aware and an example of in order to warn others in society not to commit crime. And finally, perhaps what many people think of what Jesus taught, but it's maybe not quite entirely the case, Reformation, the attempt to address the cause of the crime by rehabilitating or reforming offenders so they can understand their actions, why their actions were an offence against society and against individuals. The kind of reform can take the shape of therapy, counselling, importantly education. Many crimes are committed by people who are illiterate or innumerate and have no opportunity going back to the causes of crime or training. And giving people skills and giving them education and giving them counselling can have an important effect on reducing reoffending rates. So justice then is in view when we think about these things. What is justice? The great philosopher Plato spent the whole of his book, Plato's Republic, considering the question of justice. Well, justice just means fairness in society. Fair trial and fair punishment would be part of that. You do the crime, you do the time. Fair punishment, for the crime. Not more, not less, as it were. Maintaining justice is a key feature of a moral society. An unjust society is not a moral society. Justice cannot be achieved without some form of punishment, however, and the punishment must address the cause of the crime and reflect the severity of the crime. The murderer shouldn't just be given a fine, and the person who stole some of the sweets shouldn't go to prison for life. There has to be a proportionate form of justice. Certainly for retributive theories, this would be the case. Prisons in Britain. The prison system in Britain is at breaking point. Numbers of inmates is far too high. 80 to 85 to 90,000 prisoners in Britain. And that's hugely expensive. £30,000 a year for someone in prison. When released from prison, offenders often reoffend, and rehabilitation is needed, not just a prison sentence, it's argued. Some prisoners are given the opportunity to reflect and reform, and that has a big effect. But it's a difficult thing to do. And it's difficult to get a job with a criminal record, so you need skills and you need training to kind of get reintegrated into society. So prisoners can often learn even more about life of crime in prison, educating each other on criminal methods. So prison doesn't always work. What do Christians think about these things? Well, Christian attitudes to punishment and justice vary. A key part of many Christians' thinking is restorative justice, a system of justice that enables criminals to make amends for their behavior, meeting with their victim and apologizing and maybe doing something to make up for what they have done. Think of what Jesus did with the guy who was a fraud, the tax collector Zacchaeus. He got him to pay back what he had done. A key part of Christian teaching is forgiveness. We'll look at this a little bit later in another video. So they don't agree, perhaps many Christians don't agree with retribution as the only purpose of punishment. Perhaps it's a purpose of punishment. Certainly very liberal Christians don't like the idea of retribution or retributive theories of punishment. They would focus on instrumental theories, particularly reforming the individual. But not all Christians. The Catholic Church in particular holds to retribution amongst other theories of punishment. Christians believe in justice, which means forgiveness and punishment should go together. That you should try and follow the example of Jesus, who forgave those who betrayed him. He forgave Judas during the Last Supper, and on the cross he asked, "Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing." Christians tend to support punishment practices that lead to forgiveness. For example, restorative justice programs in prisons, led by people like Prison Fellowship. So what Jesus taught was perhaps compassion and not revenge. Because of this, many Christians have been actively involved in prison reform to ensure that people are treated humanely in prison. Chuck Colson founded Prison Fellowship. Many Christians, and we'll look at this in a minute, are prison chaplains. They believe it's important to recognize and address the cause of criminal behavior, such as poverty and unemployment and poor social conditions. This means restoring social justice and preventing crime. So punishment should enable the person to be reformed, to change their ways, and to be of value to the community. Martin Luther King famously quotes this: "Let justice roll like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream." We've got to create a just society, and we do that perhaps by helping people who are in prison become better people. Most people, regardless of faith, believe that humans should be given a second chance, however. And if they're genuinely sorry for what they've done, going by the principle of treat others as you want to be treated is generally accepted by most people, as statement by Jesus, the golden rule. So how do we treat criminals in modern society? This is a big issue. Prison is expensive, costing the equivalent of hosting the Olympic Games every year. Do the maths, £30,000 by 80,000 prisoners. That's a lot of money. There are many opinions on how prisoners should be treated. Some believe prison should be a place of isolation and punishment, without any privileges, really harsh. Others disagree. Prisoners are entitled to humane treatment, showing respect for their human rights. Big debate. The impact of poor prison conditions can be seen as rising rates of assault, self-harm, suicide amongst inmates. Many prisoners continue to complain about overcrowding and poor treatment, lack of access to important services. Prisoners often are being heard to riot over poor treatment. So some people see prison as a place of rehabilitation and reform. They believe that the treatment of prisoners should enable them to address the root cause of their criminality, prepare them for life as a responsible citizen. And many Christians work for this and support this. The services for prisoners in modern prison include drug rehabilitation, training for work, education, counselling, and especially chaplains, of which Christians are very much involved. So what is a chaplain? A chaplain is someone who is a Christian who works to minister. It means to help, to look after people, such as a priest or pastor, community member, or religious tradition. They are attached to non-religious institutions, hospitals, prisons, schools, and universities. The job is to provide pastoral care for the patient's pupils or prisoners. What's the role of a chaplain? They provide counselling to inmates, supporting them through rehabilitation, seeing to their spiritual needs. Prisoners need someone who is not a prison officer or a warden for support due to their complex emotions regarding fear, loneliness, guilt, or family concerns. Chaplains also help prisoners re-enter the community, working with parole officers and other volunteers. Families of inmates also have access to prison chaplains. Family members can be the victims of inmates' crimes as well and require care of the chaplain just as much as the inmate. Chaplains don't have to be religious. 32% of prison chaplains are not religious. So why would you become a chaplain? Well, there is something of God in everyone, no matter what they've done. Christians believe we're all made in the image of God. So it's our duty to support them. Working as a chaplain is following Jesus' footsteps. You're showing compassion, love, and kindness. Indeed, Jesus said in Luke 4 that we should visit those in prison and who are sick. People are more than just their worst thing they've ever done in their lives. So in matters of the spirit can only be solved through certain types of therapies, and chaplains are not there to judge. They're there to help, support, and guide prisoners through perhaps a process of reform. Humanists also work as prison chaplains. The humanist pastoral support volunteers, for example, at Winchester Prison, includes meeting inmates with nil religion on their admission, holding discussion groups, providing counselling, bereavement support for inmates. It's really important for prisoners who are unable to attend funerals of loved ones to benefit from this type of community support offered by those who have suffered the loss of family and friends. And the humanist chaplain would say they're there for the inmates. Most importantly, this doesn't mean that we feel sorry for them, and we do offer them enough compassion. Moreover, we need to talk about the idea of prison reformers, and you should have looked at someone like John Howard and Elizabeth Fry. Elizabeth Fry was a Christian and a Quaker who felt called to go in and help prisoners around the UK. And when she found inhumane condition, she set about writing a report that was presented to Parliament. And this meant that children and women who were in prisons got education, got skills, got better food, and so on. John Howard was another prison reformer who went and produced a report for the government of the time because of his Christian beliefs that led to some of the main reforms in prison policy that we've seen in the UK. So finally, in this section, the death penalty, the ultimate form of punishment. Capital punishment, a type of punishment that's been used for thousands of years for the worst criminal behaviors. It's still legal in over 80 different countries, although 50% of these countries have not used it for the last 10 years. The majority of countries that have the death penalty now are nations like China, Afghanistan, and the USA. In America, it's called death row. If you're waiting to become executed, you're on death row. And it's a very popular part of TV programs, films. 82% of global nations don't use the death penalty. The methods of the death penalty have changed over the centuries as governments look for cheaper and more humane ways to end someone's life. In America, this is ranged. Today, this is the lethal injection. Before that was the electric chair and gas chamber, firing squad, and hanging. But today, lethal injection is the main use. Other less humane methods are used in other countries. Saudi Arabia and North Korea decapitate people. Shooting is used in Taiwan, stoning in Sudan. And the UK Parliament abolished the death penalty in 1969, although public opinion has at times been in favour of reinstating the execution for the worst criminal. Some people are convicted of crimes deserving of the death penalty have later had those crimes pardoned. This new evidence has come to light. This is one of the problems. Can you ever be sure? Because you can't undo the death penalty. This means innocent people have wrongly been convicted and their lives taken without cause. For some, this is good enough reason to keep the death penalty abolished. In the UK, those who favour the death penalty have fallen from 75% in 1983 to 48% in 1953. Now, Christians have a view on the death penalty. Very liberal Christians think only God has the right to give and take life. Execution goes against the sanctity of life. All life is precious, and only God should end it. It says in the Ten Commandments, you shall not kill. A very clear commandment. Jesus taught compassion and forgiveness. The woman caught in adultery was facing the death penalty. And Jesus said, I didn't condemn her. He said, he didn't cast the first stone. Whoever's without sin cast the first stone. And the people left her. Jesus, moreover, on his own execution by the death penalty, said God would forgive and asked his Father to forgive his executioners when he was on the cross. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. So Christians favour reform over execution. Many work as chaplains in prisons. Jesus said, turn the other cheek, love your enemies and forgive. And execution does seem to go against this. However, there are conservative Christians who very much are for the death penalty. They would more typically follow the Old Testament law of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It continues in the same passage. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man his blood shall be shed. So the Old Testament specifies 36 different capital offences, crimes deserving death, including idolatry, blasphemy, and murder. Some Christians say the death penalty was not only approved but created by God, and that capital punishment homes the commandment, thou shalt not kill, by showing the seriousness of the crime of murder. Particular Christians like Quakers have campaigned against the death penalty since the 1818, that human life should be respected and everyone is a reflection of God, and it contains a little bit of God. Punishment should always be used to reform, the Quakers think. First prison reformers, in fact, were Quakers who worked, like Elizabeth Fry, to maintain the dignity and humanity of prisoners. Do not repay anyone for evil, but be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone, St. Paul says. Roman Catholics, however, are divided. Traditionally, Catholic Church has allowed but not encouraged capital punishment. In 1997, the Vatican issued a statement saying that execution was acceptable where the identity of the criminal was absolutely confirmed and where the execution was the only means protecting society from that criminal. The Vatican also states that non-lethal means of punishment were more in keeping with the concrete conditions, the common good, and the dignity of the human person. So, slightly moving away from encouraging to discouraging the death penalty. Humanists' attitudes to the death penalty. Well, capital punishment is generally opposed by humanists because they think premeditated killing is wrong, even when carried out by the state. The death penalty raises the possibility of error, and the irreversible failure of justice by issuing a sentence cannot be reversed. Remember, humanists don't believe in life after death, so that's it. You've exterminated, extinguished a person's life. If you get it wrong, that's terrible. So humanists believe in treating criminals fairly and helping them ensure that innocent suspects are also treated fair. So there are many arguments for the death penalty, economical arguments and arguments from justice. There does, it is argued, need to be an ultimate punishment as an act of deterrence, theory of deterrence. For the benefit of society, the death penalty might be necessary. Some believe that teachings on justice allow for the use of the death penalty. Barack Obama said, while evidence tells me that the death penalty does little to deter crime, I believe there are some crimes, mass murder, rape, and the murder of a child, so heinous, so beyond the pale, that the community is justified in expressing full measure of its outrage by meting out the ultimate punishment. Mrs. Thatcher said, people go out prepared to take lives, other people forfeit their own right to life. She was for the death penalty. The justice system in the UK has sometimes failed to work, even though there are many examples of dangerous criminals who need to be permanently removed from society. For example, Miles Williams, 19, from East London, was convicted of the murder of his girlfriend Kirsty Treloar, who was 20. He had previously been arrested for violently dragging her along the street, but was released on bail, so he shouldn't contact her. In cases like this, people would agree that the justice system has failed the victim and her family, and the death penalty would have solved that. The average cost of keeping a person in jail for a year is $60,000, something like 30 or 40,000 pounds in the UK, sometimes higher than the average yearly salary. The average cost of a lethal injection is $1,300. Some would therefore argue economically it makes sense to kill someone deserving the death penalty than keep them alive in prison for life. This person on the right, Aileen Wuornos, was a convicted serial killer. She was executed in 2002. Previously, she had told the court, "You have to kill me, I'm evil. If you don't, I'll just kill again." What should you do with that? Arguments against the death penalty. Well, finally, some people say it's not acceptable, it's not moral, it's not right. Because there's little evidence that the death penalty works as a deterrent. In fact, the opposite, that it encourages violence, creates a culture of violence. Religious people might agree with these views, particularly Quakers and those that are liberal, because they believe life is sacred and shouldn't be ended by human beings. Amnesty, which was founded by a liberal Anglican minister, opposes the death penalty for all crimes without exception, as it doesn't deter crime. It's used often by unfair justice systems. It discriminates. Statistics show in America the death penalty disproportionately is used against the poor, minorities, and members of racial, ethnic, religious communities who are in the minority. In the USA, you're 7 times more likely to receive the death penalty if you're black, and if you're white, much less. It can be used as a political tool by many governors who have fast-tracked execution to show they're hard on crime. Other arguments against the death penalty include humans make mistakes, they can get judgments wrong, so innocent people can be killed. Botched executions leave a person dying in pain and agony for hours, which is inhumane. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Capital punishment is against the better judgment of modern criminology, against the highest expression of love and the nature of God." This is a democracy. The government is me. The government is killing somebody, and I am killing somebody, said Steve Earle, the magician. So what do you think? Are you for or against the death penalty? Make sure you've revised this. You've revised the theories of punishment. You revised how prison chaplains and prison reformers have sought to change the life of prisoners. Video 2 of 5 videos.